Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get started. I went by, the bulletin said 6:45 and I gave an extra 5 minutes, so. If anybody else trickles in, that's fine too. But, so it's been a few weeks due to our Lent schedule. It's normally every other week, and then we've had blizzards every other week. So when we get started tonight, we're going to get started in chapter 7 because we did the first 6 chapters last time, way back in the long ago time. And tonight we're going to do 7 through 12, which is the end. So we'll finish up Ecclesiastes tonight. And then we're not going to meet again because it's going to be a while again, because next week we've got Pan-Orthodox Vespers down in Beckley on Sunday night. And then week after that, we've got Bridegroom Matins, because that's Palm Sunday, so we have the first Bridegroom Matins that night. And then the week after that is Pascha, is Easter. So I will be unconscious, so I will not be doing anything that evening. And so it'll be both. And so mostly eating. And then the week after that, I'll be in a turkey coma. The week after that, we will have class again. So that is 4 weeks from today, April 27th. So April 27th, when we meet again, though, we'll be going through the Song of Solomon, which is about sex. So if you need to encourage some people to come to Bible study, you tell them, April 27th, we're talking about sex. Get them all curious. And then I'll disappoint them when they get here.
Excuse me, now that
Yes.
I'm taking another sabbatical, do we have the Mediterranean diet so that's...
I'll get it for you after
Easter?
After class.
Oh.
I'll go over to the office and get it for you.
All right, thank you.
Okay, so there's a little bit of review since it has been a while since we went through Ecclesiastes when we're all depressed. Ecclesiastes is written from the perspective, we said, if not by himself, King Solomon at the end of his life. Right? It's written at the end of his life, looking back on his life, looking back on the way he spent or misspent his life, and talking about it in mostly negative terms. Right? We talked about how Ecclesiastes is a wisdom book, and it sort of fits into the paradigm of the other wisdom books we've been reading, like Proverbs, in that wisdom literature, one of the major themes is that there's 2 ways, like 2 roads that you can travel down, 2 ways you can live your life. One that leads to God, to eternal life, to Christ, and the other one that leads to destruction. Well, Proverbs, for example, was trying to show you what those 2 ways were and encourage you to take the right one. Right? Ecclesiastes is written from somebody who went a long way down this road that leads to destruction and then realized where he was. Right? And so he's writing to tell us, look, I went down that road. Right? I tried all that stuff. In the end, it doesn't give you what you're looking for. It doesn't pay off the way you're hoping it will. Right? And so, King Solomon, he could say, you want to talk about money? I was the king, right? I had gardens, I had palaces, right? I had servants, right? I had gold, I had silver, I had everything you could want. In the end, what did it get me? Nothing. Right? It was all worthless in the end. Right? So you want to talk about sex? I had 1,000 wives, right? 300 wives, 700 concubines. Right? What did that get me? In trouble. Right? That got me a lot of trouble. Worse than nothing. Worse than worthless. It destroyed my kingdom. It destroyed my life. Right? All these things that you think you might want to chase after, here's where they leave you in the end. Right? And so we've had this refrain over and over again, starting at the very beginning, where it says, vanity, vanity, all is vanity. And we talked about how the word that's translated vanity there actually literally refers to an emptiness. Right? An emptiness. And it's often used to describe an empty wind, a wind that doesn't carry anything. Right? A wind that isn't cold or hot. I mean, it doesn't accomplish anything. Right? And we talked about how that theme of emptiness goes all the way back to the beginning of the Old Testament, when with Cain and Abel. Abel's actual name, Hevel, means vanity or emptiness or a waste. Right? Because Adam and Eve, he was their firstborn, or secondborn, loved him, cared for him, right? Raised him, and then what happens? His brother Cain murders him, and all that's for nothing. He's gone. And so the author, who's called in Hebrew Kohelet, which means like the teacher, that's translated over as Ecclesiastes, as the teacher of the assembly or the church in the Greek, is looking at all these things in life and saying, ultimately they're empty, ultimately they're meaningless, ultimately there's nothing there. Okay? And taking it to the distressing extent of, we've read lovely little bon mots like how lucky children are when they die while they're still children, and how it's even luckier if you're never born at all. Those kind of happy things, right? But amidst all of this sort of depressing look at the world, the sinful world we live in, and what it has to offer, there have been these little things, right? These little examples of these little things where hope sort of peeks out, where he talks about, for example, finding some enjoyment in your work, in your life. When he talks about friendship, right? Well, there's friendship, right? There's a good thing, all right? When he talks about fearing the Lord, there are these little things where he says, well, in the midst of all of this sort of meaninglessness and all of this trouble and all of this suffering and all of these things in this fallen world, there are these little rays of hope. There are these good things. Okay? And so tonight we're going to read through the second half. I think when we get to the end, it's not going to, the whole, once we have read the whole thing and kind of understood it, I think is not going to be as depressing as it is while we're working our way through it. We do still have some more kind of bad news to work through here. But so let's go ahead and get started, and we'll talk more as we go, obviously. Chapter 7, verse 1. A good name is better than good olive oil, and the day of one's death than the day of one's birth. Well, there's another lovely one. The day of you die is better than the day you're born. It is better to go to the house of mourning than to go to the house of drinking. For this is the end of every man, and the living will take it to heart. Sorrow is better than laughter, for by a sad countenance the heart is made better. The heart of the wise is in the house of mourning, but the heart of senseless men is in the house of merriment. Well, what's he talking about there? He's talking about, again, two ways to live your life. One way is remembering the fact that you and I, everyone else who's alive, is eventually going to die. This is something that we don't like sitting around thinking about every day. I'm going to die today. But this is what he's encouraging us to do. Why? Well, because if we keep that in mind, and live our life in accordance with that, it's going to change the things we value, right? It's going to change how we spend our time, the things we chase after. If we keep in mind the fact that we're going to die, all of a sudden, trying to build up that savings account doesn't seem quite so important, right? We keep in mind the fact that I could die later today, I could die tonight, I could die tomorrow, right? All of a sudden, trying to go out and party tonight and have a good time doesn't seem that important if I may not wake up tomorrow morning. Whereas the people who are sort of in denial of that, because it is denial, because we are all going to die, that's the truth. People who are in denial of that, the people who try not to think about that, they're the ones who are going out to the house of merriment. They're the ones going out drinking. They're the ones going out. They're the ones heading down this road without even realizing. Right? And so while it seems obvious to all of us, well, I'd rather be happy than sad. Right? I'd rather have a good time than have a bad time. I'd rather be frivolous and laugh than think about or talk about serious things. In reality, when we look at the long term, often we're better off thinking about and dealing with the serious things. Often we're better off, being sad, or at least putting in hard work and being tired, right? Than just trying to have a good time all the time. Verse 5, it is better to hear the rebuke of a wise man than for a man to hear the song of senseless men. For like the crackling of thorns under a pot, so is the laughter of senseless men. This also is vanity. Oppression makes a learned man dizzy and destroys his vigorous heart. The end of matters is better than their beginning, and a patient man is better than one haughty in spirit. Do not be hasty in your spirit to be angry, for anger rests in the bosom of senseless men. Do not say, why were the former days better than these? For you do not inquire wisely concerning this. Verse 10, how many times, this is proof that I'm getting old as I start saying that now. How much better were the former times than these? Right? Things were a lot better back in my day when I was a kid. Right? Back in my day, we didn't have all this fill in the blank. Right? Things were great back then. Now everything's a mess. One of the oldest written inscriptions we have from Sumeria is written in about 5000 BC. Right? This inscription says, I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but says basically, our city is collapsing, children don't listen to their parents, right? No one respects authority, no one obeys the laws, surely this is the end of the world. Right? 5000 BC. Right? Could have been written yesterday, but also could have been written in 1000 AD. Right? Could have been written in 0 AD, right? Because things haven't really changed.
35.
Right?
They were writing the epistles, weren't they already?
Right. So this has been the person. Why is that silliness? Well, for one thing, when I was a kid, my dad was saying, man, things were a lot better when I was a kid. And when he was a kid, his dad was saying, things were so much better. Because it's not true, right? There was no golden age in the past. Right? Human beings have always struggled with problems, pretty much the same problems. We've seen this as we read through Genesis, for example. Right? And we read about these families and the sibling rivalry and the infighting and the back and the forth. All stuff that's still going on today. It's the same stuff. Right? Human beings haven't changed. We've got more toys and doodads and technological things to play with, but we're the same people. Right? So verse 11. Wisdom is good with an inheritance and profitable to those who see the sun. For wisdom in its shadow is as the shadow of silver. But the abundance of the knowledge of wisdom will give life to him who has it. Okay, so, verse 13. Behold the works of God, for who can put in order him whom God made crooked? In the day of what is good, live in that goodness. But in the day of trouble, consider also that God made one harmonious with the other, that a man may not find out anything that will come after him. What's that saying? Well, the part at the end, a man may not find out anything that will come after him. Right? That's talking about, from our perspective in this life, right? We don't know the future in terms of what's going to happen once we're gone. Right? He's just been talking about inheritances. And he says, a lot of people that work their whole life right? Accumulate all these things so they could leave a big inheritance to their children. Right? Well, once you're gone, do you have any idea what's going to happen to that money that you worked so hard for? I can give you a clue. The government's going to take half of it.
When you raise it.
Yeah. Government's going to take at least half of it. Right? And then, whatever's left, assuming nobody contests the will, right? And assuming you don't have any debts and they don't come after it, right? Assuming all that, then some of it may go to your kids, and then who knows what they're going to spend it on. Right? Who knows what they're going to do with it, right? They may go running straight to the house of merriment, right? with that money. Okay? So then, what does that mean about what you worked your whole life? What you spent your whole life trying to put together? Ultimately, right? So, he's saying, don't spend your whole life trying to put together an inheritance. Verse 15, I saw everything in my days of vanity. There is a righteous man who perishes in his righteousness, and there is an ungodly man who remains alive in his vice. Right? He's saying, look, I've seen good people who die seemingly for no reason. I've seen rotten people who seem to keep living forever. Right? It's like the devil doesn't want them or something. so they're still alive. They seem to go on forever. He says, do not be overly righteous, nor be overly wise, lest you be confounded. What does that mean? Right? Well, remember we read a few chapters back, with the increase of knowledge comes an increase of misery. Right? What's he saying? He says, if you're a truly righteous person and you're a truly wise person, and you have to live in this world and see what goes on, right? And understand, and watch people who you care about go and do stupid things, right? And you know better, you're not going to have a good time, right? You're not going to have a good time. How often do we see Christ when he's living in our midst? Right? In sorrow, looking out at the people. Right? Culminating when he comes to Jerusalem before his death, and he says, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, how I long to gather you together, the way a mother hen gathers her chicks together. But you wouldn't have it. You wouldn't have it. You don't want me. Right? And so, this is kind of practical advice. Kind of practical advice. If you want to be frivolous and happy, right, you don't want to be too wise and you don't want to be too godly. Because if you're either of those things, you're going to look out and you're going to see a lot wrong, and you're going to understand just how bad things are in this world. Verse 17, do not be very ungodly, nor be hardened, lest you die before your time. It is good that you lay hold of this, and do not let your hand let go of it. For the one who fears God, all things will turn out well. Wisdom will help the wise more than 10 rulers in the city. For there is not a righteous man on earth who does good and does not sin. Also do not take to heart all the words people say, lest you hear your servant cursing you. For very often he will act in an evil manner against you, and many times he will afflict your heart, just as you have cursed others. So this is giving an example. Right? If you listen and pay attention to everything people around you say, again, you're not going to have a good time. Right? Because a lot of what people say around you is not going to be positive about you. It's not going to be directed towards you. Of course, the irony is, you hear your servant cursing you and saying what a bum you are, right? How rotten you are, or your kids when they're teenagers, or whomever, right? Telling you, where you could go and take it to heart, you're going to be miserable, but afflict your heart, verse 22, just as you have cursed others. Because none of us are innocent of that either. Right? No. None of us are innocent of that either. The fact that we get along at all means that the people who care about me dismiss or don't hear half of what I say about them. Right? And we sort of all have a gentleman's agreement, right? Not to take anything we say too seriously. Otherwise, we would not get along well at all. We would constantly be hurt and offended. Verse 23, I proved all this by wisdom. I said, I will be wise. But it was far from me. As for what is far off and exceedingly deep, who will find it out? I in my heart went about to know and to search and seek out wisdom and the account of things, and to know the foolishness, hardness, and madness of the ungodly man. I find more bitter than death the woman who is a snare and her heart a net, and her hands are her chains. A man who is good in the sight of God will escape from her, but the sinner will be caught by her. Right? So this is expanding on that, right? He's saying, I wanted to be wise. I wanted to understand how things work. I wanted to know, about everything in the world and how it works. And here's what I found out. I found out how foolish, hard, and insane ungodly men are. Right? He found out a lot of horrible things that he wished he didn't know after he found them out, after he discovered them. Verse 27, Behold, I found this, says the preacher, adding one thing to the other to find out the reason, which my soul still seeks but cannot find. I found one man among 1,000, but a woman among all these I have not found. Except, behold, I found this, that God makes men upright, but they have sought out many schemes. Right? So he's saying, I went out looking for a righteous person. Right? And there might be one in 1,000. Right? There might be and women he didn't find any. He's probably referring to his wives. He had 1,000. So maybe one in 1,000 are righteous, right? But even that one who's righteous, what does he say about it? Well, God makes people righteous. Meaning, when God created us, He created us righteous. And immediately what? They have sought out many schemes. Immediately we got up to mischief. Right? When I was born, I was really cute. And then I got up to mischief. Pretty much immediately. And then it didn't matter how cute of a baby I was. Right? Because as soon as my hands and feet and legs and arms were strong enough, I set out for destruction. Right? My own and anything else I could get my hands on. That was the mission. Right? That's what this is talking about. Chapter 8. Who knows the wise, and who knows the interpretation of a thing? A man's wisdom makes his face shine, and a man shameless in face will be hated. Keep the king's commandment and spare no effort for the sake of your oath to God. You will go out from his presence, but do not stand with an evil thing, for the king will do whatever he pleases. Insofar as the king has authority, he speaks, and who will say to him, Why will you do this? He who keeps his commandment will not know an evil thing, and a wise man's heart knows the time of judgment. For to every matter there is a time and a judgment, because the knowledge of a man lies heavily upon him. For there is no one who knows what is going to be, for who will tell him how it shall be? No one has the authority over his spirit to withhold his spirit, and no one has authority in the day of his death. There is no discharge in that war, and ungodliness will not save those given to it. What's that saying? Well, the end is saying, who has command of his own spirit? Meaning, who of us, when we're dying, can say, no, I don't think I'm going to die today. No thanks, I think I'm going to keep on living. Well, none of us. Right? None of us. And so, because of that, we need to keep in mind always that for every matter there is a judgment. Right? That whatever it is we think we're getting away with, whatever it is we think we're doing and God doesn't know about, or no one knows about, right? That the time will come when there will be a judgment. And to put off repentance, right? To say, well, I'll have my fun now. Right? And then when I'm older, later on, then I'll start thinking about that, and then I'll prepare myself, for when I'm going to die. Well, that sort of assumes that you get to choose when you're going to die, right? That sort of assumes that you're going to have some kind of warning. It assumes you're going to, be able to slot off a block of time, right? When I could go and, oh, then I can repent, then I can straighten this out, then I can, change my ways, right? But unfortunately, that isn't what happens in real life. What happens in real life is we don't know when. And when it comes, we can't say, hold on a second. Right? Hold on a minute, I've still got some stuff I haven't done. I've still got some things I need to take care of. As St. Paul says, it's appointed for man once to die and then the judgment. Boom, boom. And so that's the reality that we face. I know, isn't this just uplifting? And we'll get there.
Are there really two judgments? One when you die and then the great white throne judgment later on? Or are
Well, the judgment of Christ is the next thing that happens to us after we die.
Oh, right. So we don't know when that'll be.
Right. And so, we've talked about before when we've talked about Rome's idea of purgatory, that you really don't see that in the scriptures, that you get this sort of other chance to repent later. Right? What we see in the scriptures, and even here in Ecclesiastes, right, the unrighteous man dies in his vice. Right? The person who's headed down this road, when they die, is still headed down that road. And the person who's headed down, on the more positive side, the person who's headed down this road, when he dies, is still headed down this road. Right? The person who spent his life drawing closer to God, right, is still drawing closer to God when he dies. Right? So that's the perspective we've been getting from Scripture. Right? And so while, for us who are alive, right, we look and we say, well, this person passed away however many years ago, right, and Christ hasn't returned yet, so the last judgment is in the future for us, right? In terms of for them, right, in terms of their ability to repent and all that, well, we don't know all the details because God hasn't chosen to tell us all the details of exactly what that's like, right? We do know that we aren't promised any kind of second chance to repent afterwards. In fact, parables like the rich man and Lazarus sort of imply the other way. That you're not going to get a chance to switch sides afterwards. Okay. So then verse 9.
Let me ask a question.
Yeah.
Okay. Why do we have these memorial services for repentance?
Because from our perspective, the judgment is in the future.
But we don't know that for sure. We don't know that for
Right. We don't know.
sure. So,
Right? And we're praying for when that judgment happens, right? We're praying for Christ to have mercy on them. That's, if you look at the prayers that we pray in the memorial service, that's what it is over and over again. Forgive them their iniquities, show mercy upon them. There is no one who lives and sins not, right? Except Christ. Right? That's what we're praying. We're praying that when that judgment happens, which from our perspective is in the future, that Christ will show mercy on them. So, and that, because that's what we all need. Right.
I'm not asking this.
Without mercy, we're in deep dewey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's my understanding when we talk about judgment, we also talk about justice. And I think so many of us forget that justice is a process where a judgment is like, boy, the thief stole something and he broke his leg getting away, he deserves that. That is not necessarily justice. Okay? And I think as the Christian, I suppose that the Christian, when we talk about the judgment of Christ, that his justice is righteous for all of the things, not just accumulation for one thing. And what do we do? But we have a perfect advocate with the Father, and we throw ourselves on the mercy Jesus or the mercy of the courts.
Right. Well, you Protestants and your justice have to come in.
Excuse me? Is your recorder on?
Yes, it is. No. Well, no. You're making a. Let me make the point. I think you're making in another way.
You're going to redeem.
Because I think you're making a very non-Protestant point in a Protestant way.
Don't you dare.
But
Even non-Protestant.
the justice we're talking about,
Yes.
right? Very clearly the Old Testament. We tend to think about, in our modern Western culture, we tend to think about justice in terms of criminal justice,
Yes.
right? Where this person has committed this crime, this is the penalty for that crime, right? And justice is he receives the penalty for his crime. Okay? The justice we're talking about in the Old Testament is what's called distributive justice, which is more like a lawsuit. It's more like a lawsuit. It's that there's some injustice, there's some inequity that has occurred, right? There's an order that things are supposed to be in. Things are out of order. And justice is restoring that order, putting the things back in order the way they're supposed to be, right? So, in this world, the righteous person is being afflicted and is suffering, right? And the unrighteous person, take the rich man and Lazarus, right? The rich man is living high on the hog, he's wealthy, he's fat, he's, got everything, even though he's unrighteous, right? Well, what happens to them? Right? The scales are balanced out, they switch places. Right? The one who is suffering unjustly, who is a righteous man, now receives his reward. The one who already got his reward in this life, who was living unrighteously, he now is living a miserable existence. Right? And so there's that element of restoration. Right? So when we talk about justice in terms of Christ's judgment, we're not talking about all of us paying the penalty for all of our sins. Right? Which is where you run into like purgatory again. Right? Where somebody's got to, work off the prison sentence, right? We're not talking about that. The image he uses of his judgment is separating sheep from goats. Right? It's not separating bad sheep from good sheep. It's not separating sheep who made the cut of behavior from those that didn't make the cut of behavior. It's separating sheep and goats. They're two different things, right? And so there are people who have lived one kind of life and people who have lived another kind of life. Right? And both of them receive what they've been pursuing. Right? If you've spent your life pursuing destruction, that's what you end up receiving. Right? And that's justice. You get what you want. Now, it may turn out you don't want it when you get it. Right? But that's what happens. If you spent your life pursuing what is right, pursuing God, drawing closer to Him, then that's what you receive as your inheritance at the end of the day. Right? That's the wages of your work, which is another example that the Bible uses.
Now, may I ask one
Yeah.
question? All right, I don't want to pick on my brother Roman Catholic. However,
Let's go ahead. There are none here.
but we're still recording my words.
Yeah.
Okay. When you talk about forgiveness, okay, I was listening to those in authority of the Roman Catholic Church, okay, and they gave an example of a little boy breaking a window, okay. And the little boy does what's right. He goes to the owner of the house and said, "I broke your window." He said, "That's fine. You are forgiven. But now you are to pay for it." That, to me, is how they were defining or justifying purgatory. With my thinking...
Someone has to pay for the window, yeah.
Yeah, somebody has to pay for the window. You are forgiven. Yes, you...
Either you or somebody else has to pay for the window.
Or as we
Yeah.
know, yes, you hit my car, you're forgiven, but now I need your insurance card, please.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? So, how does that really hold when we call upon the mercy of the Lord, and we believe we are forgiven, or we hope we are forgiven, as opposed, yes, you're forgiven, but you still have to pay. Somehow justice has gone array in my poor Protestant mind. Would you please be so kind?
Well, to me, my argument would be that that's the problem with the entire Western, not just Roman Catholic, but it also underlies the Protestant system of thinking about justice. And that is, again, this insistence that somebody has to pay for the window. Right? So you could have the Protestant system, which is basically that Christ pays for all the broken windows.
Yes.
Right? Or you could have the Roman Catholic system where either you or a saint or somebody buying an indulgence or a family member, someone has to pay for the window for you. Right? But either way, the common thing is someone has to pay for the window, which means there is no mercy.
Yes.
Right? That's a God who has no mercy on anyone. Right? In the Protestant system, he completely punishes every sin that's committed by everyone fully. He just punishes Jesus for them instead of you. No sin goes unpunished. In the Roman Catholic system, Christ takes one element of the punishment, and then there's another element of the punishment that the sinner has to take, or that someone can take upon themselves for that sinner as an act of. But God himself does not show any mercy on anyone in the sense that he does not leave any sin unpunished. He does not leave any sin not punished to the full extent.
Come back on that. What now, please? Again?
Because in the Protestant system, he punishes Christ for all the sins, depending on what kind of Protestant you are, either of the elect or of the whole world. Right? Depending on how you look at it. Or, if you're a Roman Catholic, Christ takes one element of the punishment, and then the individual sinner has to take the other element, but it's fully punished. Every sin is punished to its full extent by God in both of those systems of thinking. He doesn't show mercy on anybody.
Yes, but may I?
Okay.
Okay, but think this way. Okay, look at the history of the church and look at, in the spirit of Christ, where you have Paul, Saul, being forgiven and welcomed into the Christian community, a man who had persecuted them with the
Murdered
authority
them.
of the, and yes, and Stephen was condemned and he died. Okay,
Yeah.
the first martyr. But if you look at Paul, okay, or Saul, he is forgiven, as we understand in the New Testament, anyway, forgiven, and becomes part of the network of those Christians in Jerusalem and other parts of the Mideast.
Right.
So to me, that is showing total forgiveness.
Right.
And first century Christians responding to the words of the Lord. Okay? So I don't understand when you have that example how you can have a diverging thinking of Roman Catholicism and probably some secular Protestants. I don't think all Protestants think that. So,
Well,
would I be correct on that?
well, you can't say all Protestants think anything. I mean, that's, there's 28,000 different denominations. So I mean, I can't say all Protestants say this or all Protestants say that. Right? I mean, obviously.
Can you call evangelicals?
Well, yeah. So I mean, I could talk about Luther, Calvin, or I could talk about American evangelicalism, and I could talk about different elements of
Various
Protestants
movements.
and things that the theology that undergirds those movements, right? But my overall point is that whoever we want to identify with the theology I've been talking about, right? The God that we've been reading about in the Old Testament. And remember, this is the mean Old Testament God who's nasty and kills people all the time. Right? Not the nice New Testament one. Right? What do we read? As far as the east is from the west, so far hath he removed our transgressions from us. Right? Not he punished some other guy for our sins. Not, he lowered the sentence for the crime. As far as the east is from the west, so far as he removed our transgression from us. Right? We read, he remembers not our transgression. Right? Again and again we read about God actually having mercy on people. Right? We read when God comes to Jeroboam, son of Nebat, remember in Kings, he's the first king of the northern kingdom, right? The one that goes totally off the rails. He comes to him and he says, I will give you a kingdom that will last forever if you follow all my laws and commandments the way David did. Now we just finished reading the story of David when we read that. And you go, wait, what? What happened to the murdering and the adultery and the... Right? All this other stuff David did. Well, he repented of it. Right? And so it's not even on the record. Right? God doesn't say, oh, well, I'm going to punish my son for that in 1,000 years. Right? And he doesn't say, well, David, said 1,000 prayers, or went on a pilgrimage to here, right? And so that made up for it. Right? He doesn't say any of that. Right? David repents and he prays, and then when God talks about David later, he just doesn't mention any of those things.
Because he has repented from it.
Because he's repented and he's been forgiven.
So at that point, then there's no more on that conversation.
Right. And so when David stands before God's judgment seat, right, it's not going to be a question of, have you paid all the penalties for your crimes? Or did Jesus pay all the penalties for your crimes? Right? It's going to be a question of David saying what he says in Psalm 50, have mercy on me, O God, according to thy great mercy. Right?
I think from an Orthodox perspective, the little boy fixes the window and his friends help him.
Well, we can push a metaphor, right?
What about Solomon? Was he repentant at the end? Because it just kind of sounds glum here.
Well, let's keep going, and we'll see where we end up. Okay. Thank you for segueing us back into. Okay. So he sort of summarizes what he's been saying in chapter 8, verse 9. I saw all this and gave my heart to every work done under the sun, wherein one man has authority over another man to injure him. Right? We read before, he was talking about the government. He said, if you look out and wonder why there's so much injustice, it's because every man answers to an authority, who answers to another authority, who answers to another. They had bureaucracy even back then, right? Instead of actual justice. Well, now here we have another example. What is authority that we have in this world? Well, it's basically our ability to hurt other people. Right? That's how we express our authority over others, is by injuring them. Verse 10, then I saw the ungodly buried in their tombs, and brought from their holy place, and praised in the city for what they had done. But this also is vanity. For no controversy comes quickly against those who do evil. Therefore the heart of the sons of men is fully determined within them to do evil. Whoever sins does evil from that time on, and for a long time afterwards. Nevertheless, I know that it shall be well for those who fear God, so long as they have fear before him. But it shall not be well with the ungodly man. He will not prolong his days, which are as a shadow, because he does not have fear before God. So what's he saying there? He's saying, I've seen plenty of people who I knew were rotten, who I knew were wicked, who I knew were leading wicked lives. And I've seen them, when their bodies, when they're going to bury them, at the funerals, they get praised, how great they were, and all the wonderful things they did, And he says, well, okay, because what good does that really do them? Right? Yeah, it's not right that happens, but A little bit of talk at the funeral about how wonderful they were doesn't change who they were. Doesn't change who they were. It doesn't change how they lived their life. Verse 14, there's a vanity that is done on earth. There are the righteous as when the work of the ungodly overtakes them. And there are the ungodly as when the work of the righteous overtakes them. I said that this also is vanity. So I praised merriment, because a man has nothing better to do under the sun than to eat, drink, and be merry. For this will be present with him in his labor all the days of his life that God gives him under the sun. Right? So he says, when I saw that, talking about his former life, he said, you know what? Forget it. Right? All of this is pointless. I'm just going to try and have a good time all the time. Right? He looks and he sees, riches don't get you anything. None of this gets you anywhere, so I'm just going to have a blast. Right? I'm just going to party while I'm alive, sleep when I'm dead. Right? Verse 16, for this reason I committed my heart to know wisdom and to see the distractions done on earth. Nevertheless, he receives no sleep day or night. Then I saw all the works of God, that a man cannot discover how he does his work under the sun. No matter how much a man labors to discover it, yet he will not find it out. And no matter how much a wise man may speak of knowing it, he will not be able to find it out. So he's saying, me being a wise person, right? He already talked about how he went see how the world works. The more he learned about that, the more miserable he was, right, in terms of how the world works. But then he said, well, I'm going to figure out how God works. Right? That was his next plan. Right? And he quickly realized that was a fool's errand. Right? And that most of the people who go around claiming they know how God works are the biggest fools around. Right? Because they don't know. We talked about this a little bit last time. Things happen in our lives that we don't understand them. Right? We don't understand why they happen. They don't make sense to us. Right? Why do people we care about have to suffer? Why do they get illnesses? Why do they get diseases? Why do people who we love and care about die young? Why do good people die young? And again, he says, wicked people just seem to live on forever, causing trouble, causing misery, causing pain to people. Right? Seemingly without stopping. We don't get it. Right? We don't understand why. Right? And we ask this question why, and we want answers. Right? Example of this that Christ gives. Christ talks about something that happened during his life. He said the people who the Tower of Siloam fell on. Apparently a tower collapsed and people were killed. Right? He says, were they more unrighteous than the rest of Israel? Is that why it happened? Because that's one of the popular explanations, right? Oh, well, they must have done something. Right? That's why that happened to them. They did something, and now this is payback. Remember Job, right? All those bad things happened to Job, and his friends show up and say, man, you must be really sinful, or all this horrible stuff wouldn't happen to you. Right? That's their explanation. Jesus says, I tell you no. He says they weren't more unrighteous than everyone else in Israel, but you're going to perish the same way they did if you don't repent. But notice what he doesn't say. He doesn't say why it was those three people who the tower fell on. He doesn't tell us. He doesn't tell us. They don't get to know. Right? I know a preacher who was bold enough to preach on that text the week after 9/11. Because if you remember at the time, everybody was saying, why did this horrible thing happen? Right? And there were some of the people who Kohelet is talking about here who popped up and claimed they had the explanation. Right? Oh, I know why this happened. Right? It's because of this or that in American culture. It's because of this, that's why. Right? All these people popped up to try and explain it. Truth is, we don't know. Truth is, we don't know. But one important thing to notice is the strange thing in terms of these explanations. So, 9/11 happens. Thousands of people are dead. People want to know why. They want to have an understanding, right? Like Solomon says, wisdom. Why did this happen? How did it happen? Why these people? Why did this have to happen? So the first thing that happens is everyone blames God. Right? Either God did this, or God quote unquote allowed it to happen, which is really God did this, right? We blame God, and then we try to come up with explanations to let God off the hook that we just put him on. Right?
I wanted to punish us.
God did this, but he did this because those people were bad, or these people were bad, or right? Or American culture, the United States did this, or da 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 da, to let him off the hook for doing it. Right? And this is the argument when, if like me, you try to talk to atheists on the internet of all places. This is the argument you get. You get, well, there's all these horrible things in the world. There's all these horrible things in the world. Right? And their argument basically goes, if there is a God, then they're his fault. Right? So all these horrible things in the world, all these horrible things happen. There is a God, they're his fault, therefore there's not a God. Okay? So let's take their argument seriously. Let's say for the sake of argument there's not a God. Right? That means all these horrible things that happen in the world, if there is no God, aren't God's fault because there isn't one. Right? It means all of these horrible things that are happening in the world are human beings doing things to other human beings. Right? Or they're the result, the long-term results of things human beings have done, like building houses in a floodplain, or right? Or tearing out a huge section of forest so then there's a mudslide 50 years later. Right? All these things can be traced back, under their argument, to people. So it seems to me that now if we say, okay, there is a God, we don't have to say they're his fault. Right? In fact, there's no reason to say they're his fault. In fact, everything we read about him says he doesn't do things like that. Right? But we've seen all of these evil things that happen in the world can be explained purely by our own actions. Right? By us taking responsibility for the things that we do. Right? We're responsible for them. We cause them. And so all of these things are happening in the world. God stands apart from these things. He stands separate from these things. Right? He gives us an alternative to this world. Because if you take that atheist argument seriously, right, then we could talk to our friend who wrote Ecclesiastes, right? Especially the section we're at now, and we could end it here, right? Yeah, that's right. There's no point to anything. Everything is just random. Right? There's no God, there's no nothing. We die, we go into the ground. So let's just all eat, drink, and just try to have fun. Right? While it lasts. That's all we've got. That's it. Right? But the point he's making is that God stands apart from this. Right? That this road is the road that heads straight into the center of this sinful world. Right? This road is taking all the things of this sinful world, all of these things that cause suffering, all these things that are empty and worthless and vain, taking them and chasing after them and making them the end-all and be-all of our lives. Whereas this road is leading us away from this sinful world, away from the suffering, away from these things that men do to each other. Away from men in authority injuring other men to prove they have authority. Right? Leading us away from all that to someone in something that is better. And so, this is the point, again, that we have to remember. It's going to come into more focus as we finish up here in Ecclesiastes. That the fact that the world, that this world, this sinful world, is meaningless and full of suffering, and often horrible, and we don't understand why these things happen, that's not the end of the story. That's all true. And we can't deny it. We can't live our lives denying it. Right? We have to accept that. But it's not the end of the story. That there's something else. Right? There's a future. There's an alternative for us beyond embracing all of this misery. Right? That's going to transform this world into something else. So that's where we're going to get make it a little less depressing. That's a big part of where we're heading.
One thing I've sort of been seeing over and over, every time somebody dies, it's considered to be somebody's fault. Everybody dies anyway. It's like, every time somebody slips on a banana peel, they're the lost. Who put the banana peel there?
Well, that's part of our living in denial.
Yes.
Our living in denial. We have, one of the things that pointed this out to me is, they've been saying forever that if you drink a glass of red wine every once in a while, it's good for your heart. Right? It's good for your heart. And so less incidence of heart disease. Well, then a study comes out and says, well, people who drink that glass of red wine every couple days are more likely to die of cancer. So they say, well, the red wine is good for heart disease, but it causes cancer. Okay. Well, what's the presupposition of these studies? It's that you'll live forever unless something kills you. Right? It can't be that, well, I've been drinking this glass of red wine, so I have a really healthy heart, so instead of dying of heart disease, I die of cancer. Right? Because you're going to die of something. Right? We're all going to die of something. But yeah, that's part of the, anytime anything happens, who's to blame?
Whose fault is it that somebody dies? It's always blame.
Right. Did the doctor mess up? Right? Did the doctor, somebody could be 100 years old, and pass away in the hospital. It's like, well, was there any malpractice? What drugs did they give them? What, we have to, that's the denial. Right? We have to live in the reality of what the world is like. Right? That this world, that we're responsible, as he says, listening to people talk about us will break our hearts all the time. But remember, you talk about other people too. Right? It's not just people do horrible things to us and make us miserable and make us suffer. We also sin and cause hurt and pain to other people. Right? And that's a lot of what goes on in this world. And in the end, we all die. Right? The question isn't, is that true? The question is, again, is that the end of the story? Or is there something more after that and beyond that? And better than that we can aspire to and put hope in? Right. Okay, so chapter 9. For I gave my heart to all this, and my heart saw all this, that the righteous and the wise and their works are in the hand of God. Whether it be love or hatred, man does not know it, although all things are before him. Vanity is in all things. One event happens to the righteous man and the ungodly man, to the good man and the evil man, to the pure man and the impure man, to the man who sacrifices and the man who does not sacrifice. As is the good man, so is the man who sins. As is he who takes an oath, so is he who fears an oath. There is this evil in everything done under the sun, that one event happens to all. And truly the heart of the sons of men is full of evil. Madness is in their heart while they live, and afterwards they go to the dead. For who has fellowship with all the living? There is hope, for a living dog is better than a dead lion. Okay, so what's that all about? He's saying, as St. Paul says, the rain falls on the righteous and the unrighteous. Right? When famine strikes a country, the famine doesn't just strike the bad people. Bad people have famine, and all the good people, all the good God-fearing people have rain, in little pockets. Right? That doesn't happen. Right? When there's an earthquake, when there's a tornado, when there's happens to everybody. So the wicked get some of the blessings, get some of the good things, right? And the righteous people get some of the evil things. Right? Verse 5, for the living know they will die, but the dead know nothing. And they have no more reward, for the memory of them is forgotten. Also their love, hatred, and envy have now perished. And they have no portion forever in all that is done under the sun. Right? So he's not saying there's no afterlife. Right? He's saying there's nothing more in this world for them. right? Doesn't matter if at your funeral someone stands up and gives a 3-hour oration about how you were the greatest man or woman who ever lived. It's not going to do you any good, right? It doesn't matter if they name, half the bridges in West Virginia after you. It's not going to do you any good, right? That's it. And all those things, whether it's the things you love, the things you hated, right? Envy, all those things are gone, right? And they're gone from this world at least. So verse 7, go eat your bread with merriment and drink your wine with a happy heart, for now God is well pleased with your works. Let your garments be always white, and let your head lack no oil. Experience life with the wife whom you love all the days of your vain life, which he gave you under the sun, all your days of vanity. For that is your portion in life and in the labor you performed under the sun. Now that sounds weird, right? Go enjoy your vain life. Right? But what he's talking about is, he's saying there are these good things. We see friendship. Now he's talking about, a wife, notice singular. Right?
So he's not just being cynical.
Like I said, he's not just being cynical. Right? He's saying there are these good things. There are these things to enjoy. Good food, fellowship with friends. There are these good things to enjoy. But you don't enjoy them in the sense of being in denial about what the world is really like. Or being in denial about the fact that you're going to die one day. Right? You enjoy these things with the awareness that there's going to be an end to this life. Right? With the awareness that there's going to be suffering in this life. Right? With the awareness that, all these bills I'm paying, all the time I spend paying bills, and all the time I spend, doing countless other things that you have to do, right? That there's not going to be some big payoff, right? There's not going to be some fair bill pay. There's a lot of this stuff that we just have to do to get through this life, right? And we can enjoy the good things in it and still be realistic about what this world is and what it's all about. Verse 10, whatever your hand finds to do, do it with all your might. For there is no work or reasoning or knowledge or wisdom in Hades where you are going. There's another upbeat one. But what that's saying is, it sounds on the one hand depressing. Like, it doesn't really matter what you do for a living. Right? Because, when you die, right, that's not going to be part of you're not going to submit your curriculum vitae to Christ at the Last Judgment, right? Oh, well, I see you were part of you were honored, but you were summa cum laude, wherever you went. None of that's going to matter, right? But what the author is saying is, that gives you freedom. That gives you freedom. The fact that what you do for a living is not where you derive your fulfillment. It's not where you derive your ultimate worth, right? Means that whatever you do for a living, right? You can take it and do it and enjoy it. Whether it's an illustrious profession in your society or whether it's cleaning toilets, which I don't think there's ever been a society where cleaning toilets was an illustrious profession. It should be. We need more people to clean toilets. But right? But if that's what calls you to do, if you're cleaning septic tanks, right? Whatever it is, right? Doing it diligently, right? Working hard, right? Doing it to the best of your ability, right? That's what's going to count when we stand before God. Not what our society thought of that profession, right? Not whether it was white collar or blue collar. Not how much it paid. Right? It's going to be how we approached it. The attitude we had toward it. How we did it. Right? Whatever it was. Verse 11, I returned and saw under the sun that the race is not to the swift, nor the battle to the strong, nor bread to the wise, nor wealth to men of understanding, nor favor to men of knowledge. For time and chance will happen to them all. For man also does not know his time. Like fish taken in a cruel net, like birds caught in a snare, so the sons of men are snared in an evil time when it falls suddenly upon them. I saw this wisdom under the sun, and it is great to me. There was a little city with a few men in it, and a great king came against it and surrounded it, and built great barricades around it. Now there was found in it a poor wise man, and by his wisdom he rescued the city. Yet no one remembered that poor man. And so this is the setup, right? There's this tiny little city. This great king comes with his huge armies. He surrounds it with barricades, right? He's going to wipe out this city off the planet. There's this one poor man in the city who happens to be, he's been given the gift of wisdom by God. And he figures out how to save the city, manages to save it against these overwhelming odds, right? But despite the fact that he did this great thing, right, well, nobody remembers him for having done it. Nobody knows this man's name. He's not famous. He's not in the history books. Nothing named after him. So verse 16, then I said, wisdom is better than strength, but the poor man's wisdom is despised, and his words are not heard. The words of the wise are heard in quietness, more than the shouting of those who rule in foolishness. Wisdom is better than weapons of war, but one sinner destroys much goodness.
Well, then, it's a good thing there aren't very many.
Oh, there's a few. I'm one of them. Yes.
I'm sorry, there was something that escaped me. I have a question.
Yeah.
Chapter 9, and it goes back to about verse 10.
Okay.
It says, do it with all your might, for there is no work, or reasoning, or knowledge, or wisdom in Hades, where you are going.
Yeah.
So this already assumes that, as I understand Hades, is the author saying you are going to hell already, so you do whatever you do.
No. It's not hell. Remember, Hades is there for Sheol. It's
Garbage
just,
pit.
that's Gehenna.
Yeah.
That's it. This is just the realm of the dead. Remember the time period we're dealing with. There's still, the idea of the afterlife is still sort of coming into view. So Hades is just the place where you go when you die. And the imagery that's in the New Testament that we tend to bring out a lot at Easter is that Christ goes into Hades, right? Goes into the realm of the dead and releases
Captive.
the people who are held captive there from the ancient times. The idea being that sort of the ultimate payoff of their hopes, right, is in Christ's resurrection. Right? That's the thing they were hoping for. That's the thing. Their resurrection also comes with Christ's resurrection, which is what St. Paul is talking about in Hebrews when he says that they were not made perfect at that time, but had to wait to be made perfect with us, meaning in the New Testament period, after Christ's
They
resurrection.
ask a question.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
But the question is this. When we, and I'm paraphrasing the scripture, when it says that Jesus, or the Lord, went to Hades and released those captive in captivity and paraded them before the Father, okay? Does that not presume that there was already a judgment and they were sent there?
Everyone was there, except for a couple people. In the traditional icon of that event, the Orthodox icon, it shows Abraham, and sitting in Abraham's lap are all these children, people who died as children, and then next to Abraham is the thief who died with Christ, the wise thief, who said, and Christ told, today you'll be with me in paradise, right? So they're there, and then Christ comes in leading everyone else who makes your time. And so when the church talks about paradise, they're talking about the state of souls, the souls of the righteous, we would say, between the time of their death and the time of the judgment. And when the church talks about Gehenna or Tartarus, they're talking about the state of souls that are facing destruction between the time of their death and the time of the judgment. So that's and this isn't, again, it isn't literal in the sense that we're talking about a place. Well, if you're talking about a soul without a body, it's not made of matter, right? It doesn't occupy. But so we're speaking in analogies, right? That's why I say the state of a soul.
I just
Right,
want,
but,
because remember,
yeah.
the thinking is that the soul is immortal. In Greek,
Right, yeah.
And what it is translated.
Right. Yeah, so Hades isn't hell the way we think of hell. It's just the realm of the dead. You're going to go with where the rest of the dead are.
Yeah,
Right,
it
and
just
there's not
says
going to
for me
be.
that eat, drink, and be merry.
Yeah.
Because that's where you're going.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So chapter 10. Dead flies will corrupt the preparation of seasoned olive oil, and a little wisdom is more valuable than the glory of great foolishness. A wise man's heart is at his right hand, but the heart of a senseless man is at his left. When a senseless man also walks along the way, his heart will fail him, and everything he considers is foolishness. If the spirit of the ruler rises against you, do not leave your place, for soothing puts an end to great sins. There is an evil I saw under the sun when an offense proceeds from a ruler. The senseless man devotes himself to great heights, and rich men shall sit in a lowly place. I saw servants on horses and princes walking on the ground like servants. He who digs a pit will fall into it, and he who pulls down a wall will be bitten by a serpent. He who removes stones will be worn out by them, and he who cuts down trees will be endangered by them. If the axe head falls off, then his countenance is troubled, and he will put forth more strength. And in that case, skill is of no advantage to a man. What's all that saying? Well, it's talking about through a bunch of poetic examples, that sense of justice that I was talking about before, that distributive justice, right? The idea is, in this world, princes and wealthy people exalt themselves, ride around on horses, right? Parade around on a high horse, as he'd say, But when the time comes for the judgment, those things get reversed, right? Now servants are riding around on horses and princes are walking around on the ground like servants. Right? The way Christ usually sums it up is many who are last shall be first and many who are first shall be last. Right? The place we occupy in this world may very well be the opposite of the place we occupy in the next world. Verse 11, if the serpent bites when it is not charmed, then there is no advantage to the charmer. The words of a wise mouth are gracious, but the lips of a fool shall swallow him up. The words of his mouth begin with foolishness, and the end of his talk is evil madness. A senseless man multiplies words. No man knows what is to be, and who will tell him what will be after him? The labor of fools wears them out, for they do not even know how to go to the city. Woe to you, O city whose king is young, and whose princes feast in the morning. Blessed are you, O land, when your king is the son of nobles, and your princes feast at the proper time and strength. They will not be dishonored. Because of laziness the roofing will be brought low, and through idleness of hands the house will leak. They make bread for laughter, and wine delights the living, but all will listen to money. Do not curse the king even in your conscience. Do not curse the rich even in your bedroom. For a bird of the air will carry your voice, and a bird in flight will tell the matter. Chapter 11, cast your bread upon the face of the water, for you will find it after many days. Give a portion to 7 and also to 8, for you do not know what evil there will be on the earth. If the clouds are full of rain, they pour it out upon the earth. And if a tree falls to the south or to the north, in the place where the tree falls, there it shall lie. So what are all these things that, like, cast your bread on the water? Right? Or give a portion to 7 and also to 8, for you do not know what evil there will be on the earth. What's it talking about? Well, this is talking about, related to what we were talking about before with work. Right? if my job isn't the end all and be all in terms of the meaning of my existence, right? Then that gives me freedom, right? I can do any line of work. Right? I can be in any line of work as long as I devote myself to it, as long as I work with all my strength, as long as I dedicate. That has value. Right? That has value before God. Well, the same thing is true, that same freedom is true with other things. Right? So if my sense of worth, my sense of value, if the thing I'm pursuing in this life isn't being rich and having money and having lots of things, right? That gives me freedom. That gives me freedom. I don't have to be chasing after those things all the time, right? I can take the bread I have, I can take the things I have, and I can share them with other people. Right? I can go and give to people in need because I don't have to leave a big inheritance to my kids. Right? I don't have to be wealthy. I don't have to have all of these things in order for my life to have value. Quite the opposite. Right? So now I'm free to do these things that do have real value. I'm free to share. I'm free to give. Right? And I'm free to not have to worry about, since nobody can know the future, I don't have to worry about the future. Right? I don't have to worry about the future. Because I'm aware of the fact that I could die at any time, and I'm ready for it. Right? And so I don't have to worry about when and whether I'm going to die. Right? The answer to whether is yes, but I don't have to worry about when. And I'm freed from that. Because I don't have to accomplish any set thing in this world before I die for my life to have been worthwhile. Verse 5, chapter 11, verse 5. As you do not know the way of the wind, or how the bones grow in the womb of her who is with child, so you do not know the works of God, even all things, whatever He will do. In the morning sow your seed, and in the evening do not withhold your hand. For you do not know which will prosper, either this or that, or whether both alike will be good. Right? So that's saying, you don't know when you're going out and planting seed, which seeds are going to grow and which ones aren't. It'd be nice because you could save a lot of time, right? Just plant the ones that are going to grow, right? We don't know what all the results are going to be down the road of the things we do every day, right? But He's saying, go out and do them anyway. You're not going to know the result. You may never know the result. Verse 7, the light is sweet, and it is good for the eyes to behold the sun. For if a man lives many years and rejoices in them all, yet let him remember the days of darkness, for they shall be many. All that comes is vanity. Be glad, O young man, in your youth, and let your heart cheer you in the days of your youth. Walk in the ways of your heart and in the sight of your eyes. But know for all this that God will bring you into judgment. Right? Therefore remove anger from your heart and pass by evil with your flesh. For youth and lack of understanding are vanity. Right? It's saying when you're young, right? When you're young, oh, it's great to be young. Right? And when you're not young anymore, you'll wish you were young again. Right? But at the same time, especially then, you need to remember these things. Especially when you're young and feel like you're going to live forever, you need to remember that you're not. Especially when you're young and you think that there's not going to be any consequences for your action. That's when you most need to remember that there will be consequences for your actions. That's when you most need to be reminded. And then when you do, you get rid of things like anger. You could pass by evil with your flesh, not do the things that Solomon did in his youth, right? That ended up amounting to nothing and destroying him and bringing him nothing but misery. Chapter 12, verse 1, remember your Creator in the days of your youth before the difficult days come, and the years arrive when you say, I have no will to face them. While the sun and the light, the moon and the stars are not darkened, and the clouds do not return after the rain. In the day when the keepers of the house tremble and the men of strength are led astray, when the women who grind the grain become idle because they are few, when the women who look out the windows will remain in darkness, when the doors are shut in the marketplace and the sound of grinding is low, when one rises up at the sound of a sparrow and all the daughters of song are brought low. Also they will look from the height and there are terrors in the way, When the almond tree blossoms, the grasshopper grows fat, and the caper plant is scattered. For man goes to his eternal home, and the mourners go about the marketplace. Remember your Creator until the silver cord is removed and the golden flour is pressed together, and the pitcher is shattered at the fountain, and the wheel runs together at the well. Then the dust returns to the earth as it was, and the spirit returns to God who gave it. Vanity of vanities, says the preacher. All is vanity. Right? So he's saying, especially in your youth, that's when you need to remember your Creator. That's where you need to start going down this road. Right? That's when you need to begin living this life. Right? Because the time is going to come when there's going to be suffering. The time is going to come when you're going to have struggles. Ultimately, the time is going to come when you're going to die and you're going to be mourned. And even when the city you lived in is going to collapse into dust. And your spirit that God gave you is going to return to God. Now notice we've been talking about a little bit the notion of the afterlife here. Notice he doesn't say your spirit's going to go to Hades. Right? Notice here he says, when you remember your Creator in the days of your youth. Right? When you start out down this path that leads to God. When you're on that right path, the one Solomon didn't take in his youth, then you get through those tough times. Then you're prepared for those that are going to come. Right? You're prepared for the sufferings and the struggles and everything that are going to come. And then when that time comes that you die, and a time comes when you're where you lived and everyone you knew is gone, and nobody remembers your name, then your spirit is going to be with God, who created it. Verse 9, because the preacher was wise more than others, he taught the people knowledge, and the ear will search out his well-ordered proverbs. The preacher sought diligently to find desirable words, and what was written is upright. They are words of truth. The words of the wise are like pointed sticks, like nails firmly fastened. They are given from the collections, and abound from them by one shepherd. Moreover, my son, guard yourself, for there is no end to the making of many books, and much study is weariness of the flesh. Verse 12 is a good reason to avoid graduate school. Yes. Guard yourself, for there is no end to the making of many books. And much study brings weariness to the flesh. That's the truth. Verse 13. Yep. Because remember, with the increase of knowledge comes the increase of misery. Verse 13, hear the conclusion of the whole matter. So here's the summary. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole man. For God will bring every work into judgment, including everything that has been overlooked, whether it be good or evil. Start out down this road. It's the road that leads to God. And you'll make it through this world with all the emptiness and all the struggles and all the suffering and all these things that we don't understand. You'll make it through to something better. Right? And while you're on your way through, enjoy those good things. Friendship, your husband or wife, while you have them. Your work, eat and drink.
Beer and wine.
Especially red wine.
Okay, so thus ends Ecclesiastes. Hopefully you agree with me that in the end it's not as depressing as it was when it started out. Sort of gives us the, it's giving us the other side of the story from Proverbs. As I said, when we get back together in about a month, we'll be doing Song of Songs or Song of Solomon, which is all about sex. So recruit friends and neighbors and loved ones, and then when they get here they'll be disappointed because it won't be that titillating. But
Nothing is as titillating as it's supposed to be.
yeah. So it's all vanity, yeah. So, thanks everybody for coming tonight.